Hi, I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, host of Highly Sensitive Money. I'm a money coach, certified financial planner, and a highly sensitive person who brings money and social justice together. If you're someone who feels deeply, can endlessly think through how one decision affects everything else, or has ever struggled with all the things that traditional financial thinking leaves out, you're in the right place. In this show, I chat with highly sensitive people on how they handle their money, and with money experts on how they cultivate social justice in their work. Questions? Please go to allthecolors.net and schedule a free 30-minute call. And I'm happy to share resources on investment management, money coaching, workshops, or anything else money and social justice related. Join us in this episode as we explore money and sensitivity while honoring that all of our well-being is interconnected. Today, I'm joined by financial coach and founder of Arise Financial Coaching, Nicole Stanley. We talk about what it means to build a relationship with money that isn't driven by fear or deprivation, but instead by alignment, values, and even joy. We explore what financial empowerment looks like for neurodivergent folks, especially those with ADHD, and how systems of automation and clarity can support nervous system regulation. Nicole also reflects on how childhood experiences shape our money patterns and why confidence, not just numbers, is often what people are really seeking. This conversation is rich with honesty, Brat energy, and deep compassion for the messiness of creating safety in an unpredictable world. Welcome, Nicole, to Highly Sensitive Money. I'm excited to have you here.
I am thrilled to be here.
And right before this, you were kind of talking through what is this podcast going to look like. And I've had so much fun just listening to your other interviews, learning more about your journey. I love seeing other women teach about finance, but I want to hand over the mic to you. How would you describe the work that you do today?
Yeah, so my name is Nicole. I am a financial coach first and the founder of Arise Financial Coaching. And I started this business in 2020 when the world was falling apart a little bit, mostly on accident. I became a personal finance nerd, junkie, whatever you want to call it, when I got married. I got married very young, and I thought, and I definitely wanted to portray that I was not stressed about money because my parents were very worried about me getting married so young. And so I specifically remember because my husband at the time, he's still my husband, and at that time, he was my husband. My husband was going into a career that was not going to make a lot of money. So he was going into a ministry career, and my dad used to drive me through the really rough parts of town and tell me that if I got married to him, that that's where I was going to live. And so he was trying to not want me to get married because we were young and didn't have money. We were in debt. And so, out of necessity, I decided I was going to figure out this money thing a little bit more, mostly because I did not, under any circumstance, want my dad to be right. So I enrolled in my first personal finance course at that time. I was studying business in school and really just devoured it, mostly because I grew up in a house where my dad used to tell me that unless I was an attorney, a accountant, or a engineer or a doctor, there was no future. There was, I was going to be, the American dream did not exist and blah, 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 right? And he really nailed that into me. So I put my full self when I first got married into learning as much as I could about investing and budgeting and, anything like that, because I knew that if I could figure this out, then maybe I didn't have to be that horror story that my dad was kind of portraying that I would end up being. So classic Brat energy. We ended up paying off our first $30,000 worth of debt in our first 10 months of marriage. And we did that on $56,000 a year. And then with that same AGI over the next 4 years, we ended up saving our retirement to over 6 figures, buying a fixer-upper live-in flip that we did, and getting our family to Coast Fire by age 27, which if you guys are listening to this, Coast Fire is just this fun term for when you have enough money saved in your retirement that even if you don't add any money to it, you'll still retire a millionaire and you'll retire comfortably. Now, being someone who watched my parents fret about retirement my whole life, that to me was achieving I mean, I don't know what else. I had arrived at age 27, and it brought me a lot of hope, especially being a stay-at-home mom at that time with one child, another one on the way. And so I naturally just started helping friends and family before I knew about financial coaching as an industry. I just knew that, learning more about my money helped me feel more in control of my life. And I just couldn't shut up about it. So anyone who would let me see their budget, I'd be like, let's get in here. Like, let's start making a plan. And then in 2020, when my husband got furloughed, he was working at a church. And I remember us kind of looking at each other from across the table and being like, well, what if I charge somebody? Like, what if I started doing this, And it was from there that I kind of learned more about myself as an entrepreneur, started helping people. And so now Arise Financial Coaching serves about 100 clients globally right now. We've helped hundreds, and then we have 2 full-time ADHD, like me, people on the team. And I'm still kind of the same person, which is not shutting up about figuring out how people can feel more in control of their money, feel more in control of their life.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. That's quite a story to be able to reach Costa 5 by age 27, to have had, it sounds like the fear that your dad gifted you actually really helped in some ways.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I consider it more of like a brat energy a little bit, right? My dad tells me, oh, you can't, it's going to be hard for you to do something. My natural reaction is, okay, that's a challenge. Now I'm going to figure out how to do it, right?
Okay. That's what you meant by brat. I was like, I wonder what that means.
Yeah.
Justify. Yeah. And then when you said 56,000, just to really let that sink in for people, 56,000 combined income between the two of you, a young child, another one on the way, and you still managed to save quite a bit of money. And I know that I've heard in some of your interviews that one of the things that you look back, you're like, well, there was a lot of deprivation energy in how you were doing that.
Yeah.
How has that shifted? How do you help your clients not get stuck in deprivation energy? Because it reminds me when I was doing yo-yo diets when I was in high school.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I'll be honest, it was Dave Ramsey that my first financial course was. So I'm still working to detox from Dave Ramsey in the sense of his kind of energy. If you guys haven't listened to him before, he's very intense about paying off debt. He yells, he takes the chains, where the borrower is a slave to the lender, and he smashes the chains, and you're like, hear him in your head whenever you spend money. And so it's taken quite a few years to let go of that spending equals bad mentality that I kind of absorbed then. And I'm naturally, just being someone with ADHD, I'm very naturally all or nothing. And so those years of my life was very all. And some of that was because I just really thought I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so I was willing to make sacrifices to do that. But learning more about myself along that path, I realized, wow, I was not meant to be a stay-at-home mom. It was, very overwhelming for my, just not the right fit for me personally. And so, I think when I look back at what I was doing to achieve with my money, it became backwards because, we paid off the debt. We did a bunch of cool stuff. And then when I tried to spend money, I would get a panic attack. And that told me, okay, red flag here. The goal is not the right goal, because obviously if my goal is how do I have a healthy relationship with money, then it's not going to equal me panicking when I spend money, right? And I think that sometimes people think that if they want to achieve with their money, they have to get into that mode. And so I think the one of the most rewarding parts of coaching, and you probably agree with this, is helping people find that balance, which is the Goldilocks of their progress, right? Like not too hot, not too cold, but just right. And I didn't really think that way. And I wish I would have had somebody who told me, you could still make some progress, but maybe you don't have to resell cloth diapers on Facebook Marketplace. Like, what do you think? Right? So
yes, I completely hear that. And one of the things that I heard you say is that at the beginning of your journey around finances, you were very, very clear on your yes. You were saying yes to being a stay-at-home mom, and you were willing to do whatever was needed for that. When I'm helping clients with creating their own spending plan, their cash flow, their budget, I often have them start with identifying their values, what's really important to them. And that just makes the no's to whatever random thing you might have spent on that you'd immediately forget so much easier to do because you're so clear on your yes. So even though maybe it sounds like the pendulum swung a little too hard, you still learned so much about yourself. And I'm so happy to hear that you figured out a way of earning money and living that supports you and that respects your ADHD brain. And you've brought that up a couple of times. I'd love to hear more about what are some of the things that you hear, that you see that are specific to people with ADHD and money? Because I'm not as familiar with the diagnosis or the way of being.
Yeah. So ADHD is a neurodivergence. It is a difference in the way that our brain takes action. So the three kind of main components of ADHD are impulsivity, which is kind of the classic thing. Impulsivity. The second part is executive functioning. And this is always the most ADHD thing when I cannot remember the third part. So it's like I know it's like working memory. Oh, attention. Okay, so it's attention, which is the whole diagnosis. So these three components, just the research they've found, make people with ADHD often less successful with money in many ways, right? Our impulsivity affects our shopping habits. Executive functioning also affects, some of the complex follow through that's required with budgeting. Like, it is why many of us, when we see a budget tracker, like our brains go like, oh my God, like I'll never do this, or the follow through, right? There's so many attention to detail parts of money management that kind of leaves a lot of ADHD people feeling like, well, I'm just not really invited to this conversation because that's not who I am. Therefore, I could never be good at this. And because I think I was so motivated to, prove my dad wrong, I figured out, before I knew I had ADHD, because I was late diagnosed, all my teachers and friends, they knew and they kind of suggested it, but I just thought like, nah, who cares, right? Until I became a mom, and then, wow, did my symptoms really impair my ability to focus, and just kind of crashed out. Like all of the masks that I had held my whole life and things that were like cute growing up, like, oh, she's just messy. She's just, a space cadet, whatever. It was no longer cute when you have a crying baby. And so that's what really making me seek out a diagnosis and stuff, because, reading about children with ADHD, I kept trying to tell my husband, like, but that was me. That's like normal. And he's like, well, that wasn't me. And you know what I mean? Like, that's so long story short, before I knew I had ADHD, I was coming up with financial systems for ADHD because I knew I wasn't going to do the cash envelopes. I knew I wasn't going to do the tracking stuff. I knew that I still was going to want to spend when, I wanted to go out to eat. So I needed to find a way to automate some of that, to make it more visual. And, I would say the automation piece has been the biggest part of ADHD, because we typically are going to struggle to show up and do mundane tasks over and over and over again. And so if we can find a way to automate the simple stuff so that we can focus on the fun stuff, which for us, I know there's only two parts of tracking that I really want my clients to do. And I want them to track how much money are they making, because that tells us everything, right? But that's also a fun number to track if you think about it, because sometimes it goes up and then it's like fun. And then the other number is how much can we put towards your goals. So if those are the only two decisions you have to make every single month, then your money becomes a little more fun, right? Especially if the game is, oh, I was planning to make X amount and now I made a little bit more, right? Because we're always like under guessing and things like that. So turning money more into a game kept me more engaged. And so it's like that for many people with ADHD. Most of us I think we're 7 times more likely to be entrepreneurs than people without ADHD. And so we obviously are smart and successful. But sometimes we just have to go about our money management. Not sometimes. We have to go about money management differently to be successful in that regard, because most of the advice is made for people with not ADHD brains.
Right, without any kind of neurodivergence. And I think that is one of the parts of neurodivergence that I found for myself too. As someone who's highly sensitive and I get exhausted and overwhelmed more quickly than other people, being an entrepreneur away from co-working with a lot of control over my time has increased my productivity and increased just like my happiness so much. So for anyone out there that's like wondering if neurodivergence is part of their way of being, entrepreneurship, although it can be very hard, also has those upsides where you can really tailor it to your needs. And one thing that you said that I'm remembering from clients that I've worked with who have ADHD, the color coordinating, the like visual feedback, that like, this is how much space you have. That sounds really great. And also that you only track two numbers, and the two most dopamine inducing numbers, right? How much income are you making and how much are you putting towards what you want to create?
Yeah.
Do you have your clients use credit cards? Because that can sometimes be like a confusing part where you have access to money that you don't actually have.
Yeah, it's funny because I always ask my clients when they're starting, especially if, someone is in debt or trying to stay out of debt, is if they're willing to put their credit card points to the side for 3 to 6 months to find out more about themselves. Like, I'm not against credit cards. I use credit cards, but I always joke with people like, I couldn't change my spending habits if I tried at this point. Like, I've got myself, like, I know what our family needs, and we spend what we spend on food and etc. And so I think that that's a great thing to reintroduce back into the plan once somebody's gotten a really good idea of how they spend, how their automations work, because it's just an extra step. Like, I always tell people, like, so we know that our goal is to find out more about our spending and then also to try to stick within a good Goldilocks, right? That just not too hot, not too cold. And so when we add the credit card in, it makes it harder to know when that too hot, too cold is, because that's not connected to any real money. And so if we can just go back to using real money, which would be not cash like physical, but debit card with an account, that at least keeps us more connected. And then once we get into a groove and are used to a new way of spending, then I don't think there's any harm in reintroducing a credit card. But it would be based on what is that client's, relationship like with credit cards, etc.
Yeah, that's really smart. It makes me think of like the feedback that you got from sweatpants versus jeans. Jeans just give you feedback so much more quickly. If you're going to a buffet and don't want to overeat, wear jeans.
Yeah. Or buy stretchy ones, whatever.
Or yeah, I mean, if you don't want feedback, then that's like the credit cards of the world. Wear your sweatpants to it up. And you mentioned a little bit of the background of your childhood, but I'd love to go back into that. That's one of my favorite context questions. Of what was the background of your childhood? How do you see that affect the work that you do today, if at all?
Yeah, well, I mentioned this earlier, but I would say that my entire life is a reaction to my childhood, like most people, right? Either good or bad. But I will say I grew up in a household where there was a lot of turmoil, and some of that is my own story and some of it isn't. But I grew up in a house where there was more turmoil than money, but the money was a big symptom of the turmoil. And so I watched the way that my dad carried that, and he carried that my dad's like the kind of guy who carries his heart on his shoulder. Like, you really know what he's feeling. And there were a few moments that really shaped me as a kid. The first was, I remember when my dad told me that my college fund was gone, and that, while I was looking at these other schools, and my dad was a software engineer for Microsoft. So I thought in the early 2000s, like, I'm going to school, like, we're doing good. That was a really big moment for me when I realized, like, oh crap, it's not just become an engineer and everything snaps into place. I remember I realized at that time, like, it really mattered who you married. I remember thinking, like, you got to have a plan, right? And that was a big shaping moment I would say the other ones were around my dad's kind of hopelessness at times, different times. He lost his house after 2008, shortly after. And that was a very big shift for me, thinking again of how when I was younger, we had a certain lifestyle. And then all of a sudden, it just changed overnight. I remember my dad got laid off and different things that my parents went through in their own marriage. And I really realized at a young age how quickly I felt that the rug could be pulled out from under you. And I think in some ways that was a good thing because it taught me to be aware, right? I would say more aware, but in some ways it made me a little too aware, Like I started my marriage in a very stressful zone. My husband grew up in a family where they didn't talk about money. And so, welcome to the world.
Opposites attract. Wow.
Right? Where it was like, we are the type, we are never shutting up about it, right? But it really shaped that I watched him stress for most of his life and then be successful, still stressed, be not successful, still stressed. And I would say that my goal of my whole life would be I'd love to see my parents like exhale. And I don't know if I'll see that. I don't know it, but I do know that every time I work with a client and I get to see them exhale, it's like that itch that I wanted to scratch kind of at different points in my life and maybe didn't. And so I find almost more reward from seeing people change their life because it just proves to me that the story of, the American dream is dead, which is one of the things my dad used to say a lot, and he still says, it proved to me that it didn't have to be true, right? If I could participate in the story and change the story. So I would say that like the whole reason I got into this is because I saw, in my own life and in growing up, how financial stress can just take the whole steering wheel. It's like your financial stress affects everything. It affected my wedding. It affected crying on the way to my wedding because of financial stress. It affected my whole engagement, my whole first year of marriage, just fighting about money. And so while it seems like, oh, it's just budgeting, oh, it's just this, it's really not, right? Like money isn't everything, but it touches everything. And so if I can help people feel more empowered around their money, ultimately they have more empowerment in their life. And that to me is like, I don't know, a drug.
Yeah, they have more sense of agency, right? That they can make changes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I love the way that you said that although you may not be able to see your parents exhale, and we really don't have a lot of say over other people's experiences,
Right.
you can take that desire to your clients, to the people that come and say, I'm ready to exhale. I'm ready for your support. And again, it can be so much easier to do that with strangers than it can be with family members, loved ones, even with friends. And what you said about the precariousness that you experienced in your financial life growing up, that those ups and downs, it actually connects me to something else that I've heard you talk about, which is confidence. How important it is to have confidence that when life throws you a curveball, you'll have what it takes to move through it. And it sounds like that's one of the big things that you bring to your clients. Do you want to share more about how you do that?
Yeah, I think it's funny that you bring that up because I do think it's something that I don't talk about a ton because it's just my way of seeing the world. And sometimes when you see the world a certain way, it's very hard to notice that other people don't see it that way sometimes. Like recently I was on a call of one of my new clients right before this, and she had asked me really honestly, just in the middle of it. And she's like, do you think I'm like, what did she say exactly? She said, do you think I'm too far gone? Like, do you think this is too much to fix? And she'd meant it so honestly. And it's funny because as a coach now, I've seen so much worse, right? Like I mean, I didn't want to say it like that, but it's like, it's sort of like if you're like doing something every day, you forget how emotional and how scared people are that like they're beyond repair. And she told me the amount of debt she has and her income and everything. And I'm like, we can do this, right? Like we can absolutely, you may not have found the solution yet, but we can figure out one, but you're not too far gone. And I shared with her, my core belief, which is that every financial problem is fixable. At the end of the day, numbers are numbers. We can figure it out. And I think that that is a really vulnerable place for people to be, because if people hold that belief that there's a solution, even if they haven't found it, even if it takes a while, even if it's not easy, then that means that they have the agency. And I think that when we have the agency, sometimes it's scary, because that means that like we can fail too, or like it might not work out. Like I think about professionally right now, I'm like pitching book deals and I'm so scared because it's like, they might not pick it up, right? Like it's like when you believe that you can do something, that also means that you can fail at it. And I think that that's the vulnerability of that belief. And so when I share that confidence, it's not because I want it to be like naive, but I think because that confidence in yourself, which is what we want all of our clients to feel, which is I can figure it out. If I lose my job, I can figure it out. If XYZ happens, we can figure it out. We're smart enough. We're scrappy enough. We are creative enough. We can figure it out. That just puts a level of, I think, vulnerability that people, you know what I mean? Because it also means that you can fail at the same time. And so I think that I want everyone to have that confidence in themselves. But as you have that confidence, I feel it takes a lot of pruning along the way, right? Because you do fail as you get more confident. You do have to not be perfect, right? Like nobody's financial success line is linear in the sense of like everything went right and nothing happened, right? It's like, no, stuff hits the fan. The stock market crashes. The investment you thought was good maybe wasn't. Like the job that you thought was your dream job and you moved across the country for maybe wasn't. But if you have that deep confidence that you can figure it out, I think you're unstoppable.
I love that. I love that. My dad has a saying, los chingazos te hacen más fuerte, which means getting beat up makes you stronger.
I think it's true.
Yeah. And one of the things that this podcast also looks at, because I work in the alternative economy, I work in solidarity economy, I also think about how there are systems that we could have as a society that would not require us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps constantly, over and over and over. I think of countries, I think of Scandinavian countries. There's this great book called The Viking Economy by one of my good friends who's a fellow Quaker, because I'm Quaker. That's my religious background. And how much more entrepreneurship there is in those countries, because no matter what, people have healthcare. No matter what, their children have access to school. There are paternity and maternity leaves that are really supportive. And it's not that that society is perfect, but we could be doing so much more to help people be creative agents in their life, as opposed to just like, I remember one of my first business coaches told me that people at the very high end of income at wealth and very low end of wealth, like both of the extremes, the top 1% and people at the bottom living in their cars, they both develop a sense of helplessness. Because when the problem is so insurmountable, just feeling that like, you know what, I'm going to have food every day can feel so far. And when you have so much ease and access, because there's no need for you to effort at all, your sense of agency can really be depleted. And like, I feel really lucky that I've gotten to work with both sides of that. And just bringing it back to our current conversation, when clients come to me too, and they're just like, am I too far gone? One of my other friends, Pamela Capelat, will say that often as money coaches, what people are asking is, am I okay? Can I be okay? And it is such an honor to get to be part of that conversation. But again, I just want to remind people that like, yes, there's so much we can do as individuals and also as a collective. I believe that there's a lot of changes we could make to not really require people to be as bootstrappy as we do
Hmm.
right now.
Hmm.
I imagine that you probably attract a lot of clients who tithe.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
sometimes financial planners and money coaches will be like, stop tithing, which is so disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
And social justice can look it can look like so many things. It can look like redistribution. It can look like buying things for friends, like helping friends pay for things, which they may not be a 501c3 where you get a tax deduction, but it fills your heart. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, like when you have clients that come to you who are both managing debt and a desire to tithe, what are your recommendations? How do you help them navigate that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you're right. I do work with a lot of clients who tithe. I think it's a multiple faceted question because it really depends on like the denomination of the person. It's funny because, Mormons, I'm not Mormon, I'm Roman Catholic. You cannot stop tithing. Like if you stop tithing in the Mormon church, they don't let you in anymore. Like you have a card that gets you in. Some forms of like evangelicals who, they're very strict on their percentages. Other parts are really strict on that it has to be in cash. Like some people have a very real thing to that, where there are other people too that, what I always like to do as a money coach is a strong belief I have is that when I project what I would do with their money, that usually means I'm in a bad coaching space. And so my job is to help them see for themselves where their money would feel most aligned to spend. And so I just like to give people that permission if they haven't been given that permission, that they can decide to tithe less during a period or tithe more, pause tithing, ramp up tithing while they're in debt, right? They get to choose what they would like and what feels most aligned to them. And I think that that's just kind of my job, is to remind people with every line item, like whether it's tithing, whether it's housing, whether it is like, unconventional housing or the way that they live or the way that they work, to remind them that there are options and that they can choose which option they prefer best and they can feel good about it as long as they feel like they're the one choosing it. The thing that I do worry about is when somebody says, oh, well, I worry like what so-and-so would think about me if I was to do that. Well, I don't care about so-and-so, right? I care about you and how do you feel about your money being spent, because that's the mentality, right? That really matters. But I have many clients that will not give up any form of tithing. They will do the 10% throughout their debt journey, and that's okay. And then there are others who are willing to pause it, maybe just because they have such high interest debt. And sometimes it really is what they want. They're like, okay, we're going to make this commitment that once we get out of the over 30% stuff, we're going to go back to tithing X percent, right? So it's about what feels best for the person that I'm really focused on helping them figure out.
It reminds me of one of the things I often will say is that I'm an expert in money and I've got all of the experience, the education, but I'm not an expert on my client's life.
Yeah.
So they get to make the decision that's right for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm curious right now, with all of the changes happening in the US and tariffs, no tariffs, funding, no funding, how are you helping clients navigate that uncertainty? Because I hear that you've automated a lot of how they spend, what their income, what their saving goals are. But when they see inflation happen, when they see that maybe after school programs that they were using for their children that were funded by the federal government are no longer funded, how are you helping them manage the volatility that we're experiencing outside of the stock market?
Yeah, I would say it's hard because I don't really know a time when it wasn't that way. I started my coaching journey in 2020. The world was not, nothing was for sure, right? And I feel like I've seen housing prices, I've seen daycare, I've seen, the price of childcare is extraordinary. I've seen the price of groceries. Over the past 5 years, which is all I have really, right, is 5 years and people's budgets all over the country. and all over the world, some international clients. And it's funny because right now I feel that people are almost resigned to the way that it is. Like, no one's really surprised anymore. I feel that people were really surprised about housing in 2021. We saw housing prices almost double in 2021. How many clients I had that were trying to buy a house that couldn't anymore. And now housing prices are continuing to go up, right? And same thing with inflation. We saw inflation in 2020, like, oh my God, right? Where these tariff things are right now, what I'm seeing is that people are afraid, like they're nervous about it. But I will say I haven't seen changes in anyone's budget yet. And so the way that I like to view it is like I view everything, which is we're going to plan for the worst and then we're going to be surprised, hopefully, if it's a little better. But we have to plan for the worst financially. We always have to plan for the worst. And that sucks. Like, I wish I could change it. And I always say this about ideas, which is I want to live in an economy where, certain things everybody has. I don't live in that economy right now. I want to. I don't know the path to get there. I don't know exactly how the program should be incentivized, but I know that right now I've got 3 kids in front of me. I've got 3 kids who need me, who need a life, who need a home. I've got my clients who need healthcare, they need a home. So my job is to help them do the best with the situation in front of them that they have, because that's the only thing they have agency over is their own life and how they're going to approach it. And so with tariffs, I feel that I'm curious to see what happens. I haven't seen it happen quite yet. And I also haven't seen some of those, like all my clients on Social Security, nothing right now. I can only speak from what I've seen, but my goal is if people are afraid about student loans, we're going to get that back in the budget. We're going to figure it out, right? And we can do our vote, but I want to use 90% of people's energy in improving their situation, because I kind of have to show up with that energy. Does that make sense? Like, that's what they're hiring me for, is to show up for that, with that energy. So if I lose hope, nobody's got hope anymore.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. You do. And that is what they're coming to you for, to help that focus. One thing that you said is that people seem more resigned. Can you speak more about that? What do you mean by that? Like, they've gotten used to turmoil?
I think that, I would say that in 2021, I saw the most surprised. Everybody was surprised. It was out of control in 2021. Everything. Inflation. I saw people's grocery budgets double. Like, same grocery, like literally I'm doing grocery orders with people in 2021. Like, inflation after COVID was insane. Same thing with housing. Like, seeing people just seeing so many people who thought they were going to buy a house that couldn't. So many hardworking people. Seeing also Medicare or healthcare insurance double for many people in 2021, 2022. And the cost of childcare. That's the other thing is oh my God. I feel like, I see these big areas that honestly affect people. Like, most people I see, they're not CEOs of corporations who are importing stuff from China, right? So they're not oh my God, right? This is what affected them more was the cost of housing, the cost of daycare. You know what I mean? Where now I feel like everybody's just kind of everything's expensive. That's what I feel, is that everybody's mentality. Where in 2021, people were still surprised that it was like that. Where I feel nobody's surprised anymore. People are just yeah, I'll never buy a house. And I'm over my dead body, right? If we want to do it, we're going to figure out a way to do it. But again, that's my brat energy. So that's when I saw the most effect, were those years. And these years, I just see people tired. People are tired.
It makes me think of the term learned helplessness, where you're trying to overcome something over and over and over. And after a while, you just believe that it's no longer possible.
Yeah. Which, I mean, in some ways it isn't, right? The average American can't change the price of eggs right now.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of chicken has doubled in the past 5 years.
So aside from people like taking control over their own spending habits, their own things that they're doing, what other avenues do you see for change, if any?
Voting was a big one. Like, we live in a country where we can vote, and I think that's a really, I want everyone to exercise that. I also think that what I really appreciate is they've done like a ton of studies on women with wealth, and they found that if you ever want to take a community out of poverty, you just give women more money. Like, truly, like, if you want to bring like an impoverished society, you lend money to women because women naturally raise other people up. And so I'm a really big believer in the more women I can educate, like, and I don't mean this, anti men or whatever, but naturally, like, it's just where I go. Um, the studies are incredible. We give more to philanthropy. We give more to our community. We create more jobs. Our jobs are made for moms because we are moms. Like, I believe there is something inherently, well, there is something different about being a woman, right? And we are statistically less wealthy than men. And so if I can help empower more women to be financially autonomous, to have wealth, I know statistically I'm making a difference because I know they're giving more of it. I know they're employing more. I know that they are like, they're just spending it differently than men. And so that's where I see my part of it, is that the more women that I make wealthy, the better impact that they have on the world around them.
You lit up so much when you started talking about women. Your energy, you're just like, let's give women more money. Let's help women make more decisions. Let's help women own their power
Yes.
of increasing their income and trusting them to make good decisions with it because they've proven to do so over and over.
And women, people forget this. As women today in America, we have more economic opportunities than we ever had in the history of the freaking world. And so, yes, it's not perfect, but in the 70s, we needed our brother to co-sign, right? Women are statistically better investors than men. We are better bosses than men statistically. Like, we have, these cultural narratives that we've been taught about money, which is, ooh, caring about money is greedy. Like, ooh, I don't want to be, right? No, money is choices. Money is choices. And it's also the language that our country speaks. And so speak it, and speak it fluently. Like, we had a client who came to us who said, like, I know enough about money to be dangerous, but I want to be lethal. And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. Right. Because that's how women change the world. Right. Like, we can talk about it all we want, but money does it. And so it doesn't mean that we have to worship money, but it means we can't be afraid of it. We can't keep saying, oh, to care about that's greedy. No, it's not. No, it's not.
I mean, our mothers, our grandmothers, I think we're in the similar age range, millennials,
Mhm.
were they were socialized to think that money was like not their problem. It was their husband's problem. I think Barbara Staney, I think she changed her name to Barbara Houston. So she's like a first generation financial influencer.
Mhm.
She has a book, I think it's called like Prince Charming Isn't Coming, and about her experience of
Yeah,
how often they were just taught that it was unfeminine
correct.
to
It's a
think about
masculine trait.
money.
That's what we were taught. I mean, think of
And
the characters we watched growing up. The
mhm,
Evil Witch, Cruella de Vil, right? Ursula. What's the common theme here of all these villains?
they were wealthy.
They were wealthy women. We were been taught from a young age that women aren't as good with money. The advice that we have been given is all around scrimping, saving, coupon cutting. A good woman is
Mhm.
frugal, right? And I grew up in the church. I grew up very, very, those values. And so, me saying, actually, I care about the life I can give my kids, right? That I had to battle with that whole cultural programming of that's masculine, that is something you should feel ashamed of. I'm not going to say who would say this to me, but a lot of times, even when I talk about the growth of my business, I have people in my life who say, don't be greedy. Don't be greedy. Right. And I say to them immediately, because I'm aware of this, I say, I'm not greedy. I employ women. I employ moms. I'm helping moms. Right. And so at the end of the day, I'm not taking from anyone. When you make money and you do it in alignment, you're giving value, right? There's one thing if you steal it, if you steal from someone, if you're without integrity, right? But when you're looking at the world and saying, what opportunity can I have and how can I make a difference? How can I make an impact, right? Money is just one of those things that helps in that journey of making an impact. And so I think that women, I mean, we also statistically get said no to more to pay raises. There is a very real experience of women feeling like, I shouldn't care about this. And I want to be a voice that lets women know, actually, it's totally okay to care about this. Because, like we said at the beginning, if we want to make changes, if we want to have impact, we have to be in control of our money. I want to say something that might be kind of off the rocker, but have you watched the movie Cabrini? Okay.
I
It came
haven't.
out a couple years ago. I think you would love it. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. But it's the story of this nun who in the 1800s, I think, the 1800s, she was the first female to ever lead an international mission. So the Pope in the Catholic Church gives everybody permission to go and start something abroad, right? And so none of them had ever been started by women. They were all priests that would go, right? And Cabrini, she's this Italian nun, she was like, Papa, you got to let me go. And she's writing the Vatican over and over because she had this thing where she wanted to go to Asia for the orphans in Asia. And she wanted to serve the orphans in Asia and to give them quality orphanages. And she wrote Papa so many times, not Pope Francis, may he rest in peace. But she wrote the Pope so many times and they kept saying no to her. And she was like, screw that. And so she kept writing and writing till they finally called her to the Vatican and they told her we brought you here to tell you no in person because you will not stop. Right. And she was like, let me talk to the Holy Father himself. Let him say no to me. Right. And they are like, no. And she's like, I'm not leaving till I talk to the Pope. And the Pope finally says no. Right. And then she's like, it's because I'm a woman that you won't let me go. And he's basically like, yeah, you know what I mean? You're right. It's dangerous out there and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, I have to do this. I have to do this. I think about the orphans all the time, And he said, I'll make a deal with you. You can go, except, and he hands her this, this huge letters of, I don't know if you remember some of the Italian immigrants when they first came to the US, how abused they were here. They didn't have hospitals and they would die in the streets. And so this is back when the Italians were new in America. And he said, I'll let you do your orphanages, but you have to start in the West. And he told her she had to start in New York, not China, she wanted to start. And she said, my mission will touch every part of this earth. And she was also dying. She had she almost drowned as a kid, but she went into New York. Okay. She got kicked out of things. The bishop was this Irish guy who didn't want her there. She had murders, but she would not stop hustling for these children. She built the most hospitals because Italians weren't allowed in the hospitals. Mm-hmm. She had the orphanages. She pulled them out they used to live in the gutters in New York City. And literally she got kicked out multiple times and she almost died. All that's to say, okay, she lived at the same time as Rockefeller and all of them. She built orphanages and hospitals all over the world. So much so, she literally went to the Italian parliament and they don't let women speak at that time. And she yelled at them until they gave her money to open this hospital for the people in New York. And her empire that she built, Frances Cabrini, who is a saint, it rivaled that of Rockefeller. That is how big her impact was. And she had to do business with all the big boys. And she was this frail little nun who couldn't even talk. Okay? She got almost ran out by the mayor. And I look at her and I think to myself, that is what women do with money. That is what women do. Now, it might not have to be that heroic, and sometimes, you don't have to be a nun, but women have a natural tendency to give to others, right? And when I saw that movie, I was like, this is why I can't be afraid to help women feel more in control of their money. This is why I can't be afraid, because women can be trusted, They really can be.
It sounds like you found your patron saint of doing this work, right?
No,
But
I know.
it's so important for us to have role models that we aspire to kind of open up what we think is possible. I hope she makes it into your book, whatever it is that your book is about, because you get so fired up talking about her.
I'm like ready to name my next daughter Cabrini. That's like how much, do you know what I mean? Like, I've never seen someone get said no to so many times. And
not be dissuaded. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm going to start to wrap us up. Let's see. Let me just pause. Is there anything else that you want to add before I start to do that?
No, I just went on a tangent. You've made me feel comfortable, so you can cut out.
I love it.
I
don't think I will. I mean, I like long form just because it gives you insight into what the person is really like.
Yeah.
Let's see. So tell us about your ideal client. How do they work with you? I know they can find you on your website, and your website is beautiful, but just give us a little brief commercial, please.
Yeah, so if you are listening to this and, I don't know, you feel connected with me in some way, feel free to reach out. We put out a ton of free content. We do free investing classes. We do free financial literacy classes, free content on social. And if you're somebody who's tried to budget and you're not getting the results that you want, sometimes it takes a second set of eyes, a second set of accountability and creativity. Feel free to fill out an application. We have a conversation first. It's a free conversation to see if we're a match for each other, because, I can't solve every problem in the world. But if you have the specific problems where you don't see your savings increasing and you feel like your money is like a net negative, you feel like your money gives you more stress than it does making you feel in control of your life, consider working with us and applying, and we can have a chat, get to know you, and see if we're a fit.
Thank you. Thank you. That's beautiful. And I love that you're creating free content, because a lot of the times people are a little shy to start having these conversations, but getting to know the person that you may be working with can create all the confidence. And I think anybody out there who loves Cabrini is going to be so excited to work with you.
We can all get Cabrini tattooed on us. Yeah.
I can spend half the session being like, Cabrini just didn't take no for an answer.
She didn't take no for an answer. Okay. She got run out of New York. Love it.
And and it's one thing I wanted to mention, going back to that, is that we know so much about Rockefeller, but I've never heard of Cabrini.
Yeah, well, she's a patron saint. It's funny because all of Rome was filled because she touched the whole world. I mean, she opened up hospitals here in the US, in California, in Asia. She did end up getting to the West, or to the East, sorry. But she's someone who, I don't think she got a lot of press in her time, but that's like the 1800s, to be a woman, where now we kind of think like, oh, a woman leading like a foreign mission. We're kind of like, meh, right? But at the time, it was something.
Yeah. The first one always has to be such a strong trailblazer.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. And I look forward to seeing how we can continue to collaborate in the money space for women.
Me too.
As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with this reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, rising cost, childhood narratives, internal wiring that doesn't always match the systems we live in, we still have the power to create lives that feel grounded and free. Nicole's story is such a powerful example of what happens when we bring curiosity and compassion to our financial lives. Not just spreadsheets or hustle, but real alignment. I so enjoyed talking with Nicole and hearing her passion for this work. Here is a woman who brings passion to everything she does, including telling the story of a little-known historical figure. Thank you, Nicole, for being a guest today. Thank you for joining me on Highly Sensitive Money. I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, and I hope this episode helped you see how money and sensitivity can work together while honoring our interconnected well-being. We have the power to create a system where everyone's needs are met because nature is abundant. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with someone who could benefit. Your support helps this message reach more people navigating their own financial journeys. A thank you goes to Mike Schul for the music and Juan Antonio Nunez for producing. For more resources on bringing money and social justice together, sign up for my monthly newsletter over at allthecolors.net. I also invite you to schedule a free 30-minute call where we can talk about money coaching, investment management, and all things money and social justice. Until next time, remember that your sensitivity and deep thinking is your superpower.